George and the Noisy Baby. Peppa and George's family are having a sleepover at Cousin Chloe's house. Mammy Pig and Daddy Pig are looking forward to an early night. They've had a long journey. "Hello," cries Cousin Chloe. "Hello," shouts Auntie Pig. "Hello," booms Uncle Pig. Everyone makes a lot of noise in Cousin Chloe's house. They are a very noisy family. "First we'll put baby Alexander to bed," says Auntie Pig. "This is his bedroom." Auntie Pig turns up baby Alexander's musical mobile. "Alexander likes noise," she explains. "It sends him to sleep." Peppa and George are staying in Cousin Chloe's bedroom. They are very excited. "Night, night," snorts Peppa. Soon everyone is tucked up in their beds, asleep. Baby Alexander is awake. Everyone is awake. Uncle Pig tries vacuuming. Auntie Pig tries playing the trumpet. "Noise is the best way to get baby Alexander to sleep," she says. Daddy Pig has a quieter idea to try. "When George was a baby, we used to put him in his pram and wheel him around the house," he says. "That always sent him to sleep." Daddy Pig pushes baby Alexander in his pram. He only has to go round the house 50 times. "Good," he puffs at last. Baby Alexander is asleep. Daddy Pig and baby Alexander are ready to come inside. Auntie Pig switches on the alarm. "George," cries Daddy Pig, "what are you doing up?" Yawns George. "Noisy." Daddy Pig takes George and baby Alexander back up to bed. He is about to turn the light off when... gasps George. Baby Alexander is awake again. It is very noisy. Daddy Pig decides to drive baby Alexander around in the car. "Don't forget to turn off the alarm," shouts Auntie Pig. Daddy Pig forgets to turn off the alarm. The noisy house wakes everyone up. Miss Rabbit zooms across in her rescue helicopter. "Is everyone all right down there?" yells Miss Rabbit. "Yes, thank you," bellows Uncle Pig. The alarm has worked. Baby Alexander is fast asleep. "And it's all down to my noisy daddy," giggles Peppa. The end. Peppa Pig, George and the Dinosaur. "Dinosaur! Roar!" shouted George. George and his friends, Richard Rabbit and Edmund Elephant, loved dinosaurs. Wherever they went, they were always searching for fossils, stones and bones. In the sandpit, at the playground, and even in Grandpa Pig's garden. One day, when Richard and Edmund came to play, Mammy Pig had a special surprise. "We're going on a fossil hunting adventure at the beach," she said, "with Miss Rabbit the fossil hunter."
Are fossils always dinosaurs, Mummy? Asked Peppa. They can also be the remains of plants or animals from a long, long time ago, explained Mummy Pig. The children put on their fossil hunting clothes and packed their bags with special tools and fact books. Ready to go exploring? Mummy Pig asked. Yes, cheered Peppa, George and George's friends, jumping up and down. Hooray! The brave explorers set off to meet Miss Rabbit at the beach. The tide was high last night, said Miss Rabbit when they arrived. Hopefully there'll be lots of wonderful things whipped up by the waves for us to discover. Yippee! Cheered the children. But if not, you can always buy fossils from my shop at the end, Miss Rabbit continued. There's an offer on today, 2 for the price of 1. Miss Rabbit took out her fossil collection to show the children. This swirly rock is an ammonite, she said, and these shiny rocks are called fool's gold. Miss Rabbit held up some little rocks with gold bits in them. Ooh, gold, gasped Peppa. I love hunting for treasure. Unfortunately, it's not real gold, Peppa, explained Miss Rabbit, but it's lovely and shiny. This one's a belemnite, said Edmund, looking at Miss Rabbit's fossils. It's an extinct mollusk, and I believe that one is a fossilized poo. Poo! Snorted the other children. Don't worry, said Edmund. The poo is millions of years old. Edmund Elephant was very clever. Wow, said Miss Rabbit. You really know your stuff, Edmund. George pulled out a dinosaur book from his bag. Dinosaur! Wow! He asked, showing Miss Rabbit a picture of a dinosaur. No one has ever found a complete dinosaur skeleton on this beach, I'm afraid, George, said Miss Rabbit. But you might find some little fossils like the ones in my collection. Then Miss Rabbit turned to them all and said, Now, shall we get started? Peppa walked along the beach, looking at the ground, but she soon gave up. I can't see anything, Mammy, she said. Just lots and lots of sand and stones. I'm going to build a sandcastle instead. Meanwhile, George, Edmund and Richard explored the beach together. They took their fossil hunting mission very seriously. After Peppa had finished her sandcastle, she peered over at George. Look, Mummy, she called. George has found something. Mummy Pig and Miss Rabbit looked over at George. Their mouths dropped open. The explorers pointed to a huge rock further down the beach.
Oh dear, Mummy Pig, sighed Miss Rabbit. It looks like you're bringing the whole beach home with you. Hello, George, said Mummy Pig. What do we have here then? Dinosaur, said George, holding his arms out on as wide as he could go. Big dinosaur. We believe this rock contains a complete skeleton of a dinosaur, explained Edmund. George found footprints in the rocks near it, which are a clear sign. Can you help us crack it open, please? Are you sure it's not just a big rock? Mummy Pig asked. But then Miss Rabbit took a closer look at it and pulled out her phone. Yes, that's right. Very big, she said into her phone. Please come immediately. Soon after, Mr. Rabbit arrived in a big truck with a team of helpers. Very carefully, they lifted the rock onto the truck. We'll meet you at the museum, Mr. Rabbit called out as they drove off. At the museum, everyone watched excitedly as Mr. Rabbit and his team cracked open the rock. Everyone gasped. Mr. Rabbit was the first to speak. What we have here is a complete skeleton of a... Dinosaur, interrupted George. That is correct. It is a dinosaur. In fact, it is a triceratops.
confirmed Mr. Rabbit. George, you are an expert fossil hunter, aren't you? This is an amazing dinosaur discovery. Wow! Everyone cried, looking at the skeleton. Even Peppa was impressed. Now, said Mr. Rabbit, what shall we call this incredible dinosaur?
George saw us the first,
cried Peppa.
because George saw the dinosaur first.
Roar! Cheered George. Everyone laughed. In this case, I officially name this dinosaur the Georgosaurus Roar, announced Mr. Rabbit. A big dinosaur like this needs a big name like that. Everyone loves fossil hunting and dinosaurs, especially George, the dinosaur expert. The end. Peppa Pig. George catches a cold. Mummy Pig has said Peppa and George can play in the rain, but they must wear rain clothes to keep them dry. But George hates wearing his rain hat, so he has thrown it in a muddy puddle. George! Come inside, children, calls Daddy Pig. It's raining too hard now. Where's your hat, George? asks Mummy Pig. Achoo! replies George. Oh dear, George has caught a cold. Achoo! George cannot stop sneezing. Poor little George, says Mummy Pig. You don't look very well. Don't worry, I'll call Dr. Brown Bear, says Daddy Pig. Will George go to the hospital? asks Peppa. No, George has to go to bed, replies Daddy. So George is not truly sick then, says Peppa, disappointed. George, you have to stay in bed until you are better, says Daddy Pig. Why? asked George. Because you have to keep warm, says Daddy. Dr. Brown Bear is here to see George. Open wide and say, "Ah," he says. George is a little afraid of Dr. Brown Bear. He hides under his sheets with Mr. Dinosaur. Dr. Brown Bear asks Peppa to show George that he does not have to be scared. Ah, says Peppa. George laughs and comes out from under his sheets. He opens his mouth so Dr. Brown Bear can look. Ah, says George. George has caught a cold, Dr. Brown Bear tells Mummy Pig. He can have some warm milk at bedtime to help him sleep. Thank you, Dr. Brown Bear, says Mummy Pig. You're welcome. Goodbye, says Dr. Brown Bear before driving off in his special white car. The next morning, George wakes up early. The warm milk made him sleep very well. Wow! cries George, waking up Peppa. He is feeling much better. It is a lovely sunny day, but George is wearing his rain hat. He doesn't want to catch another cold. Oh, George, you don't need to wear your hat when it is warm and sunny, Mummy Pig tells him. Everyone laughs. The end. Peppa Pig, George's Balloon. Peppa and George are driving home with Granny and Grandpa Pig when they see Miss Rabbit's ice cream stall.
Let's stop for an ice cream, says Granny Pig. Why not, says Grandpa Pig. I think we deserve it. Peppa, Granny and Grandpa Pig choose their ice cream. George is next.
Dinosaur! Roar!
Says George. I think George wants a dinosaur balloon, says Miss Rabbit. All right, how much is it? Grandpa Pig says. £10, please, says Miss Rabbit. Grandpa Pig thinks the balloon is a bit expensive, but he buys it for George. Hold on tight to it, Miss Rabbit says. But George lets go and the balloon starts to float away. Grandpa Pig quickly grabs the string. This is very valuable, George. I'll hold on to it on the way home, says Grandpa Pig. Outside Granny and Grandpa Pig's house, George plays with his balloon. George, says Peppa, this is an up balloon, and if you let it go again, it will go up to the moon.
Moon!
Cries George, and he lets the balloon go. The balloon goes up and up, but Grandpa Pig catches it just in time. Peppa and George have gone indoors to keep the balloon safe. Hello, Polly, says Peppa. George has got a new balloon.
Rock!
Cries Polly.
Balloon!
Both Polly and George love the balloon.
Oh no!
Cries George, letting go of the balloon. The balloon floats all the way out the door, up the stairs, and into the attic. Don't worry, it's safe in here, says Peppa. Don't worry, says Grandpa Pig as they follow the balloon up the ladder. The only way out of the attic is the window, and the window is always shut. But the window is not shut. The balloon escapes outside. Your balloon is going to the moon, George, says Peppa. Cries George. Just then, Daddy Pig arrives to take them home. Oh dear, says Daddy Pig. There must be some way we can get the balloon back, cries Granny Pig.
Balloon!
Says Polly Parrot. Polly flies high up into the sky and catches the balloon string in her beak. Polly to the rescue, cries Grandpa Pig. Polly Parrot has saved the day. Hooray! Cheers George. Who's a clever Polly? Says Granny Pig.
Who's a clever Polly?
Repeats Polly Parrot. George, don't let go of your balloon again, says Peppa. Daddy Pig has an idea. I'll tie the balloon to your wrist, George, he says. That will stop it floating away. George is very happy. He loves his balloon. Everyone loves George's balloon. The end. Peppa Pig, George's birthday. Today is George's birthday. It is very early in the morning, says George, jumping up and down. Happy birthday, George, say Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig. George woke me up, says Peppa. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig have a present for George. When George opens it, he shouts, Dinosaur! Roar! Ho ho, squeeze its tummy, says Daddy Pig. George's new dinosaur roars. He 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 he, laughs George. Peppa has made George a card. When George opens the card, he shouts, Dinosaur! We're going somewhere very special for George's birthday treat, says Mummy Pig. Yippee, says Peppa, and off they all go. The family arrives at the museum. George, what do you like best in the whole world?
says Daddy Pig. Dinosaurs, says George. George's birthday treat is a visit to the dinosaur room, says George, jumping up and down. Beep, beep, roar, says a great big dinosaur. George is very surprised and starts to cry. Don't be frightened, George. It's not a real dinosaur, explains Mummy Pig. George loves the robot dinosaur. Surprise! Peppa and George's friends are here. Mammy Rabbit has made a birthday cake for George. It's a dinosaur cake, says Peppa. Happy birthday, George, shouts everyone. There's one last surprise, says Daddy Pig. Everybody follows Daddy Pig outside. What's that? asks Peppa, looking at George's surprise. Daddy Pig switches on a pump. It just needs to be filled with air, he says. It's a bouncy castle, Peppa cries. No, it's a dinosaur, a bouncy dinosaur, shouts Peppa. Dinosaur, says George. The end. George's first day at playgroup. Today's George's first day at playgroup.
Isn't George too small for playgroup?
asked Peppa. You can look after him, says Daddy Pig. Peppa isn't sure she wants George at her playgroup, but she likes the idea of looking after him.
Are you sure George is big enough?
Peppa asks when they arrive. Yes, he'll be fine, replies Daddy Pig.
Okay, he can come,
says Peppa. She holds onto George's hands. Snorts George, jumping up and down. Here is Madame Gazelle, Peppa's playgroup teacher. She looks after Peppa and her friends. Madame Gazelle tells the children that George is coming to play. The children are all very excited about meeting Peppa's little brother.
This is my little brother George,
cries Peppa.
Grrr, dinosaur,
growls George. Everyone laughs.
I wish I had a little brother like George,
buzz Susie Sheep. George shakes his toy, Mr. Dinosaur, at Madame Gazelle.
Grrr, dinosaur.
Ah, really scary, laughs Madame Gazelle. Peppa is proud of George, making everyone laugh.
George is my little brother. He's brilliant,
she says. Shall we show George how we paint pictures? Madame Gazelle asks the children.
George is not very good at painting,
says Peppa,
but I can show him how to paint a flower. Watch me, George,
snorts Peppa.
First, you paint a big circle.
Peppa carefully dips her brush into a pot of pink paint and draws a big pink circle right in the middle of her paper. George draws a big green circle.
No, George, that's the wrong colour,
snorts Peppa.
Watch me.
Peppa makes yellow petal shapes. George paints a green zigzag.
George, that's the wrong shape,
says Peppa. Peppa admires her flower painting.
Perfect,
she says happily. George is still painting. Instead of a stalk and leaves, he has painted another circle with 5 lines sticking out from it.
You're doing it all wrong,
says Peppa.
I've painted a flower,
says Peppa. Very good, Peppa, smiles Madame Gazelle. And look, George has painted a dinosaur. Madame Gazelle sticks Peppa and George's pictures on the wall. Now it is time to go home. What will you paint next time, George? asked Madame Gazelle.
Dinosaur!
Giggles George. Everyone laughs. The end. Peppa Pig, George's new dinosaur. George's favourite toy is Mr. Dinosaur. George likes bouncing Mr. Dinosaur in the garden, playing with him at bath time, and he loves going to sleep with Mr. Dinosaur beside him. At bedtime, Peppa says, "George, I think Mr. Dinosaur is broken." George is very upset. Mummy and Daddy Pig come in to see why George is crying. Cries George. Poor George, says Daddy Pig. Maybe it's time we got you a new dinosaur. The next day, Peppa, George, Mummy and Daddy Pig visit Mr. Fox's shop. I'm sure we'll find a lovely dinosaur here, George, says Mummy Pig. Look, George, says Daddy Pig, pointing to the shop window. There's a big one.
Oh, dinosaur,
says George. Good morning, beams Mr. Fox. Can I help you? We'd like to buy the dinosaur in the window, please, says Daddy Pig. Good choice, says Mr. Fox. This is Dino Roar. He walks, he talks, and he sings. Wow, says everyone.
Dino Roar,
says George excitedly. We'll take it, says Daddy Pig. George is playing with Dino Roar in the garden. Dino Roar sings, Dino Roar, listen to Dino Roar, roar! Careful, George, says Daddy Pig. Don't play too roughly because Dino Roar will get broken. George wants to play with Dino Roar in the bath.
Dino Roar,
says George. But Mummy Pig says, George, if you get Dino Roar wet, he'll stop working. Peppa and George are asleep in bed, but suddenly Dino Roar comes to life. Roar! Dino Roar, Dino Roar. George, says Peppa, Dino Roar has woken me up. Maybe Dino Roar should sleep somewhere else, says Daddy Pig, taking Dino Roar away. George is feeling sad. He cannot play with Dino Roar in the garden, or the bath, or even in bed. Never mind, George, says Mummy Pig brightly. Dino Roar can still roar. Dino Roar, listen to Dino Roar. Dino Roar stops walking and talking completely. I think the batteries must have run out, says Mummy Pig. Already? How many are there? Grumbles Daddy Pig as batteries pour out of Dino Roar. Hundreds and thousands, cries Peppa as she picks him up. Peppa spots something green under a bush. What's this? Says Peppa. Is it a trumpet? You found Mr. Dinosaur's tail, says Mummy Pig. Now Daddy Pig can mend him. He might be a bit difficult to mend, says Daddy Pig doubtfully. But the tail slips perfectly into place. Daddy Pig has mended Mr. Dinosaur. Ho, 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 chuckles Daddy Pig.
Hello, Mr. Dinosaur, says Peppa.
Arr, replies George. Everybody laughs. Mr. Dinosaur is George's favourite toy in the whole world. The end. The story of Prince George. Daddy Pig is saying good night to Peppa and George. Just one more dance, chuckles Daddy Pig. It's nearly bedtime. It is bedtime, Daddy Pig, says Mummy Pig. They are almost asleep, says Daddy Pig. Why don't I put Peppa and George to bed, says Mummy Pig. Can we have a bedtime story first, says Peppa. Okay, says Mummy Pig, but only if you promise to go straight to sleep afterwards. We promise, cries Peppa. Story, giggles George. Once upon a time, Mummy Pig begins, there was a fairy tale castle. The castle was home to a brave prince called George and a clever princess called Peppa. Prince George and Princess Peppa spent their days exploring the castle. They even had a cook who made them jellies, cookies and fairy cakes with cherries on top. Prince George and Princess Peppa always ate everything. When they finished exploring and eating, Prince George and Princess Peppa summoned the Royal Wizard. The wizard wore a cloak covered in stars. He put on big magic shows, and his tricks never went wrong, ever. Everybody loved living in the fairy tale castle until one day a big scary dragon arrived. Princess Peppa squealed. Her royal friends ran as fast as their legs could carry them. Only Prince George stayed to face the dragon. Princess Peppa peered out of the castle window. The dragon was very big and scary. She hoped it wouldn't eat Prince George. Brave Prince George climbed on his horse and rode right up to the dragon. "Roar," said the dragon. "Roar," said George. Suddenly Prince George giggled. The dragon wasn't scary. It was just lonely. "Dinosaur!" cried George. Princess Peppa came out of the castle and Prince George invited the dragon to a picnic. The royal cook made a feast. The royal wizard put on a special magic show. Soon everybody in the kingdom wanted to meet the dragon. Princess Peppa and Prince George held a big party and the dragon was the guest of honour. His spines popped lots of balloons, but nobody minded. The dragon liked the prince and the princess so much, he decided to be their royal pet. Prince George led a parade to celebrate. Everybody cheered. "Hooray for the dragon! Hooray for Princess Peppa! Hooray for Prince George the Brave! Hooray!" "The end," cries Peppa. "Dinosaur!" snorts George. Daddy Pig comes in to check on them. Mummy Pig has spent so long telling them the story that she's fallen asleep. Good night, Mummy Pig. Good night, Princess Peppa. Good night, Prince George. The end. Playtime for Peppa and George. This is Peppa and George. Peppa is George's big sister. They share a bedroom and lots of toys. Peppa and George love being brother and sister. They play fun games together every day. One day, Peppa and George are with Mummy and Daddy Pig in the living room. Mummy Pig has to work on her computer, and Daddy Pig wants to work in the garden. Peppa, George, why don't you two play a game? Asked Daddy Pig.
Oh, goody, says Peppa. George and I love to play games.
George likes that idea too. It is a lovely sunny day, so Peppa and George run outside.
George, let's jump up and down in muddy puddles,
shouts Peppa. But George does not want to jump in muddy puddles today. He would like to play a different game.
Okay,
says Peppa.
We can play catch instead.
Peppa tosses a ball to George, but George does not want to play catch either.
George, what would you like to play?
Asks Peppa. George has an idea for a new game. Peppa follows George to Mummy and Daddy Pig's bedroom.
There's nothing fun to play in here,
says Peppa. George shows Peppa a box at the end of the bed.
What's this?
asks Peppa.
Wow,
says Peppa.
George, do you want to dress up and pretend to be Mummy and Daddy?
George does want to dress up.
Good idea,
says Peppa.
I want to play that game too.
Peppa helps George put on Daddy Pig's black hat, coat, and shoes.
Now you must pretend to be exactly like Daddy Pig,
she says. George thinks for a moment. He makes a loud noise, just like Daddy Pig.
Very good, George,
says Peppa.
Now it's my turn.
Peppa puts on Mummy Pig's fancy dress and hat. Then she puts on the high-heeled shoes. Suddenly, Peppa is very tall. They giggle. Dressing up is very silly.
George, what else do I need to look exactly like Mummy?
Peppa asks. George does not know. Peppa goes over to Mummy's dresser. Sometimes Peppa watches Mummy Pig sit in front of the mirror and get ready to go out with Daddy Pig.
I need makeup, of course,
she says.
First, some powder.
Peppa pats the pink powder on her cheeks. Puff, puff, puff.
Lovely. Now for some lipstick.
Peppa draws on a smile using Mummy's shiny red lipstick.
How do I look?
George thinks Peppa makes a very pretty Mummy Pig.
Come along, Daddy Pig,
says Peppa.
It's time to go to work.
Peppa and George walk downstairs. They find the real Mummy Pig working on her computer. Hello, Peppa. Hello, George, says Mummy Pig.
I
beg your pardon, says Peppa. I'm not Peppa, I'm Mummy Pig, and this is Daddy Pig. Oh, I see, says Mummy Pig. Hello, Mummy Pig. Hello, Daddy Pig. George, Peppa whispers, remember to act exactly like Daddy, says George. Excuse me, says Peppa, I have a lot of work to do. She picks up Mummy Pig's telephone. Hello, yes? Do this, do that. Thank you. Then Peppa taps on the computer keyboard. Tap, tap, tap. Peppa is very good at pretending to be Mummy Pig. All right, goodbye, she says, hanging up the phone. And done. Come on, Daddy Pig, it's time you did some work too. Peppa and George go back outside. They find Daddy Pig digging a hole in the garden. Hello, Peppa and George, says Daddy Pig. I'm not Peppa, I'm Mummy Pig, and this is Daddy Pig, says Peppa. Oh, I see, says Daddy Pig. What are you up to today? We are here to do some work, declares Peppa. George jumps into the hole and begins to dig. He is having fun pretending to work like Daddy Pig. Peppa jumps into the hole to help George dig. Suddenly, they hear Mummy Pig calling from the house. Peppa, George! Mummy Pig has brought ice cream for everyone. You must take off those muddy clothes before you eat, Peppa and George, she says. I'm Mummy Pig and this is Daddy Pig, Peppa insists. Are you sure? asks Mummy Pig. That's a shame because I have Peppa and George's favourite ice cream flavours. But if we can't find them... Peppa and George quickly take off the muddy clothes. Here we are, shouts Peppa. We were only pretending to be you and Daddy Pig. Ho, ho. You really had us fooled, says Daddy Pig. It was George's idea to dress up, says Peppa. George nods, licking his ice cream. You both did a very good job, says Mummy Pig. Peppa and George love ice cream, and they love pretending to be Mummy and Daddy Pig. But most of all, they love being brother and sister. The end. Peppa Pig, George's friend. Peppa and her friends are having lots of fun at the playground today. Peppa is on the roundabout with Susie Sheep and Danny Dog. George is playing in the sandpit with Mummy Pig. Rebecca Rabbit and her little brother Richard Rabbit arrive. Richard has brought his toy dinosaur.
Hello everyone,
says Rebecca.
please can I play on the roundabout too?
Hop on, Rebecca, says Daddy Pig.
Let's go really fast,
says Rebecca. Richard wants to go on the roundabout with his big sister. Peppa sighs. If Richard gets on, it means we can't go fast.
Richard, perhaps you'd like to play with George instead,
says Mummy Rabbit.
No,
says Richard.
George has a dinosaur just like yours,
says Mummy Rabbit.
Let's go and see.
Richard is the same age as George, and they both love dinosaurs.
Richard wanted to see George's dinosaur,
says Mummy Rabbit.
Dinosaur,
roars George.
George and Richard both giggle. George, can Richard play with your dinosaur? Asks Mummy Pig.
No,
Says George.
Richard, can George play with your dinosaur?
Asks Mummy Rabbit.
No,
Says Richard. George and Richard do not want to share their dinosaurs. Mummy Rabbit gives both dinosaurs to George. George laughs and Richard starts to cry. Then Mummy Pig gives both dinosaurs to Richard. Richard laughs and George starts to cry.
George and Richard always cry when they play together,
Says Peppa.
Can you two big girls teach him how to play together?
Asks Mummy Rabbit. Peppa and Rebecca take George and Richard to the sand pit. The girls show their brothers how to make sand castles.
Wow!
George uses his spade to squash Richard's sandcastle. Richard cries. Richard uses his spade to squash George's sandcastle. George cries. This game has not gone very well. Oh no! George, what's your favourite thing in the whole playground? Asks Mummy Pig.
Seesaw,
Shouts George. George sits on one end of the seesaw, but it needs someone on the other end. Richard wants to play on the seesaw too. Mummy Rabbit lifts Richard onto the seesaw. George and Richard go up and down on the seesaw.
George and Richard are playing together,
Cheers Peppa. George likes Richard. Richard likes George. George and Richard like playing together. The end. George's woolly hat. Peppa and George are spending the day at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house.
Hooray!
George is wearing a new woolly hat.
Wow!
Don't get your new hat muddy, George, says Mummy Pig. We promise not to get George's hat muddy, says Grandpa Pig. Peppa and George are playing in the garden. It is a very windy day. Hold on to your hat, says Peppa. Wah! Cries George as his hat sails up into the sky. Catch it, George, shouts Peppa. George chases his woolly hat right through the mud. George, you are all muddy, cries Peppa. But George's hat is still clean. The wind blows his woolly hat across the garden. Oh no! George's woolly hat is caught in a tree. I'll get it down for you, says Peppa. Grandpa Pig and George watch as Peppa climbs up the tree. Perhaps I should help, says Grandpa Pig. Oops, cries Peppa. Poor Peppa has fallen from the tree and landed in the mud. I see two little piggies who need a bath, says Grandpa Pig. Next time, George's hat blows onto some reeds in the pond. Luckily, your hat is still clean, George, says Grandpa Pig. He grabs a stick and reaches across the pond. Don't fall in, says Peppa. I know what I'm doing, Peppa, replies Grandpa Pig. Splash! Grandpa Pig falls into the pond. That was a silly thing to do, says Granny Pig. We were trying to get George's hat back, Granny, says Peppa. Where is George's woolly hat now? asks Granny Pig. Granny Pig spots the hat.
Hooray!
It has landed on a spade, on a pile of stinky manure. If you walk on that manure, you'll sink, warns Grandpa Pig. Hush, Grandpa Pig. I have no intention of sinking, says Granny Pig, laughing. Carefully, Granny Pig climbs over the manure until she reaches the woolly hat. Got it, she cheers, but then Granny Pig falls over and lands in the heap of stinky manure. Ooh, smelly, Granny, says Peppa. Grandpa Pig, Peppa and George start to giggle. Mummy Pig arrives to collect Peppa and George. You promised not to let the children get muddy, cries Mummy Pig. Yeah, actually, we promised not to let George's hat get muddy, says Grandpa Pig. George's hat is the only clean thing, says Mummy Pig. The end. Peppa Pig, Peppa and George's Garden. Daddy Pig is sitting in his favourite sunny spot, reading a newspaper. What a perfect day for doing nothing, says Daddy Pig. The only thing that could make it better would be a cup of tea. He goes inside the house to make one. Grandpa Pig has come to see Peppa and George. You're going to have your very own flower garden, he tells them. Peppa and George are very excited. We need a nice sunny spot to plant your seeds, says Grandpa Pig. Grandpa Pig finds the perfect sunny spot and starts to dig Peppa and George's garden. When the garden is ready, Peppa and George will plant their seeds.
Hooray!
Oh, gasped Daddy Pig. What's going on? We're making a flower garden, says Peppa. But that's where I sit in my chair and read my newspaper, cries Daddy Pig. Flowers are more important than chairs and newspapers, says Peppa. It is time to plant the seeds. Look, Daddy, cries Peppa.
Wow!
Peppa has lots of flower seeds. George only has one flower seed, but it is a big one. Some birds have come to see what Peppa and George are doing. They start to eat the seeds. Shoo, shoo, calls Peppa. Leave our flower garden alone. Daddy Pig gets some water to help the seeds grow. As soon as they see Daddy Pig, the birds fly away. Daddy scared the birds, cheers Peppa. Grandpa Pig laughs. Daddy Pig looks like a scarecrow. Peppa, George, bath time, calls Mummy Pig. But what if the birds come back? asks Peppa. Don't worry, Peppa. I'll make sure the birds don't eat the seeds, says Daddy Pig. The birds come back again. Luckily, Daddy Pig is there to scare them away.
Hooray!
Shoo, shoo, naughty birds, cries Daddy Pig. Daddy Pig guards the seeds until the birds have gone to bed. He is a very good scarecrow. It is 1 week later. Peppa, George, come and look, calls Daddy Pig. The seeds have grown, says Peppa. My flowers are so pretty. And George's plant is very tall, says Daddy Pig. It's a beanstalk, cries Peppa. It goes all the way up to a giant's castle. Ho, ho, ho. No, Peppa, says Daddy Pig. It's a flower, but it does go quite high. George's flower is taller than our house, says Peppa.
Wow!
George has grown a sunflower, explains Grandpa Pig. Sunflowers are very tall plants. Well done, George, says Grandpa Pig. And well done, Daddy, says Peppa. You were a great scarecrow. The end. Peppa Pig, George's tractor. Peppa and George were spending the day at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house. We're very glad you're here, said Grandpa Pig. You can help us harvest the vegetables.
Hooray!
Hooray! Cheered Peppa and George, jumping up and down. Grandpa, what does harvest the vegetables mean? Asked Peppa. Ho, 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 Grandpa Pig chuckled. When we harvest the vegetables, it means we pick them so we can eat them. Ooh, said Peppa. Yummy! Yummy, said George, rubbing his tummy. Let's go and harvest, said Granny Pig. It's a good job we've got our boots on. It's very muddy out here. Peppa and George had lots of fun helping Granny and Grandpa Pig harvest their vegetables. Soon there were huge piles of vegetables all around them. What a big harvest, Grandpa, gasped Peppa. Yes, it is, Peppa, replied Grandpa Pig. The biggest we've had in a long time. Isn't that right, Granny Pig? Granny Pig, where are you? Peppa, George and Grandpa Pig looked around. They couldn't see Granny Pig anywhere. Over here, shouted Granny Pig, poking her head out from a tall pile of carrots. Ah, there you are, said Grandpa Pig, smiling. Granny, said Peppa, you look a bit carroty. George giggled. Daddy eek. Next, we need to get all these vegetables into the crates over there, said Grandpa Pig, pointing to the other side of the garden. All the vegetables, Grandpa? Asked Peppa. Yes, replied Grandpa Pig. Every single one. Everyone looked at the enormous pile of vegetables. Oh, said Peppa. Peppa, Granny Pig and Grandpa Pig began carrying the vegetables over to the crates.
Wow!
The crates were far away. Peppa looked around. Where's George? Tractor! Cried George. He loaded up his toy tractor's trailer with lots of vegetables and moved them over to the crates. That's very clever, George, said Granny Pig. Your tractor will make this much easier. Everyone helped George load and unload his tractor. That's everything, said Grandpa Pig. Thank you for your help, Farmer George and Farmer Peppa. Tractor, said George. What are we going to do with all the vegetables now, Grandpa? Asked Peppa. We can't eat them all, can we? No, Peppa. I don't think we can eat them all, replied Grandpa Pig. I know a special place we can take them, said Granny Pig. It's somewhere you and George will enjoy visiting.
Hooray!
Yippee! Cried Peppa and George. Granny and Grandpa Pig took Peppa and George to a farmer's market.
Wow!
At a farmer's market, farmers and growers sell their fruits and vegetables, Granny Pig explained. George was excited to see all the big tractors. Tractor! He shouted. George spotted an enormous tractor and pointed. Big tractor! Wow, that's the biggest tractor I've ever seen, George, said Granny Pig. While George and Granny Pig went to see the big tractor, Grandpa Pig and Peppa started setting up a stall for their vegetables. Suddenly they heard a loud rumbling noise. It was George on Mr. Badger's tractor, carrying all the crates of vegetables. Wow, gasped Peppa. George is on a real tractor. Big tractor, cried George as everybody unloaded the crates. Thank you, Farmer George, said Grandpa Pig. Now our vegetable stall is ready. Farmer Pepper and Farmer George had lots of fun selling the vegetables. Rebecca, cried Peppa, spotting Rebecca Rabbit. Come and buy some of our vegetables. Ooh, what a lot of lovely carrots, said Mummy Rabbit. How did you get them all here? Big tractor, said George. I see, said Mummy Rabbit. I would like to buy all your carrots, please. There were lots of customers at the farmer's market. Farmer Pepper, Farmer George, Granny and Grandpa Pig were very busy selling their vegetables. Hello, Farmer Pepper and Farmer George, said Daddy Pig. Hello, Daddy, said Peppa. What would you like? Said Daddy Pig, looking at the empty stall. Oh, said Peppa. We don't have anything left. Never mind, said Mummy Pig. It's time to go home now. What would you like for supper? Carrots, please, said Peppa. As you've sold all yours, we'll have to get some from the shop, said Mummy Pig. But how will we get there? Tractor! Cried George. George loved the farmer's market, but he loved tractors even more. Tractor! George loves tractors. Everyone loves tractors. The end. Peppa Pig, George's birthday. It's George's birthday today. Mummy Pig hands George a box wrapped in green paper. Happy birthday, George, she says.
Dinosaur.
Cries George, pulling out a purple dinosaur. Wow. I knew it would be a dinosaur, Stinky, says Peppa. George waves the toy dinosaur at Peppa. Too scary, cries Peppa. Peppa has painted a card for George. I was going to paint a flower, says Peppa, but George does not like flowers, so in the end I painted a
Dinosaur.
cries George. Mummy Pig tells George that they are going somewhere very special for his birthday treat. Yippee! Shouts Peppa. Where are we going? You'll see, says Daddy Pig. George's birthday treat is a visit to the dinosaur room at the museum.
Wow.
George loves dinosaurs. They are his favourite thing in the whole world. Not silly old dinosaurs again, groans Peppa. George stops in front of a big green dinosaur. He is standing on a yellow cross. There's a beep, and then roar! George jumps and begins to cry. It's not real, George, says Mammy Pig. Don't be frightened. It's just a robot, says Daddy Pig. Arr! Shouts George at the Robo-Dino. And there's another surprise, says Mummy Pig. All of Peppa and George's friends are here.
Hooray!
Happy birthday, George, says everyone. Mammy Rabbit has made a delicious birthday cake for George. I knew it would be a dinosaur cake, says Peppa. Mammy Rabbit laughs. What an amazing guess, Peppa. It's time for one last surprise, says Daddy Pig. Can you guess what it is? Something to do with dinosaurs, says Peppa. Everybody runs outside to see. It is a bouncy castle in the shape of a dinosaur. A bouncy dinosaur.
Hooray!
George loves bouncy dinosaurs, and so does Peppa. The end. George's racing car. Peppa, George, Daddy Pig and Grandpa Pig are watching racing cars on television. It's such a lovely day, you should go outside and play, Granny Pig says. What shall we do? Asked Daddy Pig. Says George. George wants to play racing cars, sighs Peppa. Let's build him one, says Grandpa Pig. He finds an old pram in his shed. Clever Grandpa Pig turns the pram into a pedal car.
Wow!
What's your favourite number, George? Asked Daddy Pig. George replies. Daddy Pig paints a big 2 on the car's bonnet. Along come Danny Dog, Zoe Zebra and Pedro Pony. Look at George's racing car, says Peppa. We'll race you 3 times around the garden, George, they cry. Go! Peppa shouts, waving a checkered flag. At the end of lap 2, George is in the lead until one of his wheels comes off. I'm the chief mechanic, cries Peppa. I can fix it. George gets back in the race, but now he's last. Oh no! Granny Pig comes outside to see what the noise is all about. Come on, George, she shouts. Meow, he says, pedalling as fast as he can. Go, George, go! Snort Peppa, Daddy Pig and Grandpa Pig. George finally takes the lead and zooms across the finishing line. George is the winner, declares Grandpa Pig. Well done, George, says Peppa. You're the best racing driver in the whole world. George agrees. And you've got the best chief mechanic in the whole world too, adds Daddy Pig. Yes, that's me, says Peppa, pointing to herself proudly. Everyone laughs. The end.
Hi kids, Did you have fun watching this video? Then like and subscribe for more.